Everyone, thank you all so much for your patience in the waiting room. We just needed a second to get everything situated and get started. I'll be underway in just a second as soon as we populate everyone that was there. And I can ask you all, if you're not part of the panel for now, if you can go ahead and mute your microphones for us, that would be amazing. I will go through and mute some folks as well, but if you can, that helps us out quite a bit. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started as we continue to get people rolling in and just introduce myself. My name is Iliana Limón Romero. I am the NAHJ Sports Task Force co-chair. Joe Rodriguez could not join us today, but he's very excited about this session and thrilled that we're able to work with Mlb Com to introduce our members to so much of what they do and some potential opportunities with them in the future. So it's a great collaboration opportunity and we're excited about it. I am thrilled to welcome this group. Want you to know, as you came in, you heard it, but just a reminder, this is being recorded. This will be shared with all of our members who could not attend. We have numerous student chapters that reached out to ask us if they could have a recording, which is very exciting. And then we also have members who just have scheduling conflicts in general. So thrilled to have the opportunity to share this with them. That means what it's being recorded to, it's on the record, everything that's said is going to be shared. So we want to make that super clear for everyone from the start. We have a lot of speakers. We're thrilled how many people from Mlb.com decided to come and join us. We will have them popping in and out because they have some different things within their work schedules as well. So I will do a quick rundown introducing everybody and give them a chance to speak a little bit, and then we'll get to some specific questions that apply to each of them that they'll answer. So some will answer, not all the questions. And we're open to questions from you all. So if you want to hop in the chat, let us know if you have any questions as we go, any reactions, we welcome that, and we will adjust accordingly. So again, for those just coming in, if you can make sure you're muted, that helps us make sure we get a great recording and that we can hear all our speakers. All right, so to kick this off, I'm going to go run down the list. I wanted to open by asking each of our participants who are here right now how they got their start at Mlb.com. For me, this gives us all an introduction to the pathways into the organization and what it was that told them on joining and getting started. So I will be going around the horn with each of them. So first up, Greg Clayman, Mlb.com, Senior Vice President of Content. Greg, if you can tell us how you got your start and what got you to join.
Watch out, I can talk a lot. This could take up the whole hour, so I'll try to be brief. I was actually at the NBA at NBA.com about 21 years ago when baseball was first forming their own digital company. So I was one of the first folks recruited over to baseball. Came over, we were a small staff. The beauty of that is a lot of us got to do a lot of different things in the beginning, everything from writing, editing, to coding, to designing, to many things. So like a lot of folks who came in the company in the beginning, we got a lot of just amazing experience across the board. My career kind of took me in numerous paths through the years where I started in content. I worked on the fantasy gaming side. I worked on the biz dev side, moved over to product development. When I say product development, like digital product development, so like building apps, building websites, and all that. I actually did that for a decade, and then came back to the content side in 2018 for a number of reasons, but mostly just because it really is my deepest passion. And I come from a family of writers, and I've loved baseball and baseball writing and baseball content since I was 4 years old. So I've been here 21 years now and have loved 96% of my days. I can't say every day, but for the most part, the job's been wonderful.
That's a pretty good average. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Matt Myers, VP of Content. How'd you get your start here?
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. I started here 7 years ago, so I'm a relative rookie amongst this group. I was previously at ESPN.com and ESPN the magazine for a few years. I first got my start in the baseball industry at Baseball America magazine in Durham, North Carolina, and that was doing a little bit of everything, editing, handling photos, cutting photos, writing stories. So that was like a good entry into the business of getting my hands dirty in a variety of ways. Now at MLB.com, I oversee like the national homepage content budget and manage a number of our national writers.
Sounds great. Jim Banks, MLB.com, Senior Executive Editor. Again, how did you get your start with MLB.com?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and happy to be here. Yeah, I started my career in newspapers back in the 90s and bounced around. The way to get ahead back then was to kind of hop from paper to paper and move up the chain. So I went from Ohio to Georgia, back to Ohio, New Orleans, New York. It was when I was in New York working at Star Ledger that MLB.com was created. And the editor-in-chief at that time was somebody I knew from the newspaper business, and he was looking for experienced managers, and I had some at that point. And also had some thoughts about some of the problems facing the newspaper industry. Kind of saw the writing on the wall there and felt like this was a great opportunity to take a chance on something new and different, and also create something from scratch was really appealing to me. So I rolled the dice and hopped over to MLB.com on opening day of 2001, and have been gainfully employed here ever since.
Fantastic. Jennifer Langoch, Executive Editor of National League, and please feel free to correct me if I mispronounced your name. How did you get your start?
Hi, thanks for having me. I actually got my start when I was a junior in college, and I saw posted on our internship wall at Mizzou, this internship at MLB.com, and I said, I want to write about baseball for the rest of my life. So this sounds really cool. I applied for it, was accepted, and spent a summer interning with our Braves writer down in Atlanta. Went back for my senior year, and it just serendipitously, the Pittsburgh Pirates job opened up, and Jim, along with others, were kind enough to offer it to somebody who had no business being ready for that kind of job. But I started there 3 days after I graduated. I was covering the Pittsburgh Pirates, spent 5 years covering that beat, moved to St. Louis, covered the Cardinals beat from 2012 to 2018, after which time I transitioned to a management role, first overseeing our reporter-producer program, and most recently moving into a role overseeing all of our National League content.
Excellent. Thank you so much. David Venn, Executive Editor, Spanish Content, most popularly known as part of Las Mayores. Can you share how you got your start here?
Sure. I spent most of my adult youth in the Dominican Republic, and that's where I got my start. Television, newspapers, and that's where I really cut my teeth. And then several years later, I was back in the States, and I was at ESPNDeportes.com. I did everything from, it's somewhat similar to what Greg was describing with a small group. We were doing HTML code. We were writing headlines. We were editing stories. We were doing our own stories. And from there, I moved over to MLB.com about 14 years ago, and very similar. You know, we do a lot of different things. In my case, you know, I edit. I'm an editorial producer. I'm a reporter as well, and so that's where I am right now.
Sounds great. And finally, Jessie Sanchez, senior writer, a longtime NAHJ member, and someone who's moved in and helped a ton with recruitment with us. So Jessie, how did you get your start at MLB.com?
Well, first I want to thank everybody for being here. This is so great to see such a nice crowd, and NAHJ is, as you mentioned, pretty important to me. I've been a member since '99 or so. I actually met my wife at NAHJ conference. Now we have 3 NAHJ babies. So it's all good on that front. So we actually, I started at a newspaper, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, from around '97 or so. In 2001, I moved over to MLB.com. So I was a Texas Rangers beat writer. And over the past 2 decades, I've been, a beat writer, a national reporter, international prospects, features guy, based in here in Arizona. If you do a lot of spring training stuff, a lot of it, most recently, our duties have expanded, as you mentioned, to outreach, mentorship, team building, and diversity, things that are really important to us as a group, and they're really important to our company and to all of us, each of us here personally. So I'm really happy about that direction, and again, just really happy, and I think it's really cool to be here with you folks.
Thanks, Jesse. I really appreciate it. Jesse played a big role in coordinating all of this group coming together. So we appreciate that so much. I guess coming back to a couple of our MLB.com folks, you just talk a little bit, Jesse sort of touched on it, but why was it important to you all to come and speak to this group? What value do you see in kind of connecting with NAHJ? And I guess I'll start with you, Greg, on what it was that made this a priority for you all to do this kind of outreach.
Sure. Yeah. Since I moved back into content 3.5 years ago, I'd say our top goal really has been to, build a world-class, diverse staff, right, that speaks to all of our baseball fans across the world, right, no matter their background, their language, whatever it might be. Making connections with a multitude of different, different journalist groups, not just this one, has been really, really key. And something that, I want to give Jesse a lot of the credit. He's the one who's really worked hard this year and in years past, but has really become a focus of ours as we look to hire hopefully more folks every year, as the world gets back to being mostly normal. And as we build out our staff, it's really important for me to have these connections so that we just have better relationships with, the future talent of our game and of our sport and create just fluid pipelines of talent, that we can hopefully over time and every year, hire into our organization.
Fantastic.
Want to add to that, Jesse? Did I cover it all? Okay.
I think we got a thumbs up there. All right. So we have our first question that's rolled in from somebody who actually is a faculty member and wanted to ask a foundational question about how those of us in academia should feel about steering journalism students to organizations that are owned and operated by the leagues they cover. What degree of editorial independence exists, and how does MLB.com cover issues critical of the league's operators, owners, players, etc.? So I guess we can start with Greg again, coming back to you about this particular question. You have background both at NBA and MLB, and I don't know if you can weigh in at all on that.
Yeah, part of the reason, now I'll let Matt Myers weigh in on this too. But part of the reason I came here 21 years ago, right, was the promise of being a legitimate, real news organization. Whereas, where I was before that wasn't necessarily the case, and a lot of the leagues have evolved and changed over time. But, what was sold to me on top of coming to work for baseball, which was the number one most exciting thing, really was that we are going to be a top level, news organization covering the game as well as we can. I will say, obviously, there will be, some limitations here and there day to day, what you can write. We're not going to take unnecessary cheap shots at people, but we're not going to hide from the news either, right? It's really important to us that we cover everything as well as we possibly can. I will say the last year and a half has been challenging, the way it's been for every single person on this planet. A lot going on, especially in 2020, trying to get the game back on the field. Starting up the season, lots of different things, definitely made it a major challenge for us, and had to cover every single thing day to day. But, it's our goal is to every year, sort of even push that line more and more, cover more than we did the year before. An example of that too is a really big thing that we changed, I guess, 3 off seasons ago, was really covering free agency rumors, what's going on, deeper than we ever had. In the past, we had pretty good coverage, but we know that the number one thing fans love to read are trade rumors, free agent signing rumors, and all that. And we really wanted to be at the forefront of that, and not just report when something's about to happen, but dig up the little tidbits here and there, sort of report on every single thing that's out there and everything we could, and be a destination for people, right? Not just a league site where we put up when something officially happens, right? We wanted to be, in many cases, Mark Feinsand, who works for us, who's really evolved into one of the best breaking news folks out there, be the outlet that broke news for the first time, right? Not just be the league that waits till the press release comes out. So, we take that approach with everything, and every year we try to do more and more where we are, either first out there or have the deepest voice or the largest opinion on something. Matt, I don't know if you'd like to add something better than that, because that wasn't the best answer.
No, I think that's right. But what I'll add to it is that, when folks come to us and are applying for jobs, especially people who are going to be covering teams or producing forward-facing content, I'm also honest with them, right? Because we do want to get people excited about baseball. And right now, if you're covering a rebuilding team, we want to give fans reasons to say, hey, here are reasons why you should still be interested in, the Orioles and why you should still be interested in the D-backs if you're a fan of that team. We're not going to be antagonizing them and saying like, why isn't the owner spending more, and like, calling them out for doing X, Y, Z. And if you're not comfortable with that, then maybe this isn't the place for you to work. I mean, there's a place for that too, right? Like I live in New York City. There's a place for what the New York Post does, but that's just not who we are. And so I like to think that we just occupy a different place on the spectrum of how we cover teams.
Yeah, and it's not hiding from the truth. It's more of like, let's focus on what's going to get fans excited, right? And if a team isn't performing well right now, there's a pretty good chance in most cases there's a lot of great players about to hit the majors in the next year or two, right? And our coverage can shift toward focusing on those players more, especially at the end of a season when a team is out of a race, right? At a certain point, come late August or September, if your team's 30 games out, the day-to-day games may not mean as much, right? What you're really focused on is, okay, how are we going to be better next year? And that's how our coverage may differ from other places.
I could chime in just with a real quick thought on that as kind of the old man in the room. To me, that it's a level of discourse issue. As someone who came up in newspapers in the 90s, I think we've all seen in all facets of American life the level of discourse plummet. And I feel like the way we cover the game is where the level of discourse ought to be. And it doesn't mean we get everything right, but we're going to have a level-headed, fair discussion about anything that happens. And that does not always happen in this world. If you're titillated by hot takes, as Matt said, this isn't the place for you. But I feel a great amount of pride in how we handle things.
Sounds great. Thank you all so much. So to give our members a sense, there's going to be several job-oriented questions that I'm going to ask next. We have a lot of people who are in college looking to get internships. We have people who are recent grads who are looking to get jobs. And then we have people who are more mid-career who are looking to move up and kind of get a sense of how to expand and broaden their opportunities. So the next kind of group of questions will be kind of tailored toward that. And the first I wanted to kind of think, it might be best directed for Jim, Jennifer, David, and Jessie, just to give our group a sampling. What kind of jobs do Mlb.com and Las Mayores typically have available? So I guess if we can start with Jim, who just finished up, if anything stands out, just to give people an understanding of the range of opportunities that, pending availability, pending openings, sort of things, what typically comes up that people reasonably could expect might be an option with Mlb.com if they were looking for job postings.
Yeah, we have a pretty broad range of entry-level positions. I'll let David and Jessie can speak to Las Mayores more than I can. But on our side, on the coverage of the clubs, there are production jobs where you're doing editing and production and getting stuff on the site. There are jobs that are a combination of writing and production where you do a little bit of both. Where you serve as a backup beat reporter and also edit and produce content. And then there are beat reporter jobs that come open too. There are also this summer, and as a program I think we're going to continue into the future, is a part-time reporter position. It was really successful for us this year where we hired, I think 7 was our number this year, part-time reporters who worked, over the summer is like seasonal position, worked all summer helping back up on games. And that's a really good entry-level position as well. It kind of mimics what we used to do with an internship program. It's shaped a little bit differently, but it's a great opportunity to come in and write and show us what you can do and get clips. And one of the things I had mentioned earlier in the day to Jessie is, a full half of our staff now that cover teams full-time. So we have 30 beat reporters and a full 15 of them came up through our internship program of the part-time or came from the RP program, which is the reporter producer position. So it gives you an opportunity to show us what you can do. If being a full-time beat reporter is your end goal, then there are a bunch of different paths to get there on the entry level with us.
And let me just tack on to that a second too. It's really important to me and to all of us here that, when we hire folks, new folks, even existing folks that are in our org, is that we really work on diversifying everyone's skill sets in their career, right? I don't love when someone comes in and just does one job, right? That's limiting. It's not helping that person build their resume. And there's a chance, like sort of what happened with me. I came in writing a lot and I kind of realized, I don't really love writing. Part of it's because I wasn't that great. Part of it is I just stressed out. I never liked I hated reading my own stuff. There were a ton of reasons behind it. My fear is, someone comes in, they do one thing for 5, 10, 15 years. They decide, hey, I want to do something else. And it's like, well, where do you start then, right? So the best thing we can do for folks is really get them exposed, not just to what they're doing. I mean, they may have a primary job writing, but try to give someone 5, 10 hours a week, whatever it might be, doing something else. And if there's not something definitive, telling everyone in the group, no matter who you are, even if you've been, in our team like Jim or myself for years, it's like, hey, if there's something new you want to do, something you're interested in, raise your hand, right? There's lots of parts of a content org that aren't even just what, Jim, is mentioning here, right? There's people who do data and strategy. There's people who work on just ideating new ideas, right? Who work on special projects, who might help with all-star balloting, fantasy gaming, you name it, right? There's all these different areas of our org that content touches. And it's really important that we always encourage our staff to just get involved in something else here or there, because, you might find out you like something else. And the best things we can do for any employee is either set them up for more success within our own company, or even if outside of our company, right? We should always, no matter who you are, try to position that employee best for their future. And that's just super important to our entire staff.
That's great. David, I don't know if you can speak to some of the Spanish language opportunities in addition to some of the other ones that I think most of our members are pretty familiar with, the seasonal and the intern level opportunities, but perhaps not as much with some of what you might have available with Las Mayores.
Yeah, for Las Mayores, the last few years, we've had a lot of seasonal things as well. Obviously, it's all in the Spanish language, so it's similar in the sense that it's editorial producing. There's some limited original content, but it's editorial producing, it's description of videos, it's mostly that. And some of it's seasonal, some of it's not. But a strong mastery of not only Spanish in the writing part, but also the baseball writing part of Spanish. And so those are the things that we have. And this is strictly lasmayores.com. This is not the social end, which others could speak of, and I know they have theirs as well. But it's editorial producing, like I said, headline writing, description of videos, and so those are the things that we typically have on a year-to-year basis.
Go
ahead, Matt.
One other thing I'll mention is that prior to 2020, MLB and MLB.com, the digital arm had been, like the league office and the digital arm had been in separate places. And just prior to March of 2020, we had moved into one office, which I think long-term will offer a lot of benefits once people are actually going back to the office and finding ways to get involved, meeting people in different parts of the company, and maybe seeing other aspects of the business they may want to get involved with. So I know that that's one thing a lot of us are really excited about once we get to a place where more and more people can be in the office every day, is having that experience. We only really had it for about 2 months prior to shutting down in 2020.
Excellent, good insight there. I have a follow-up that just came in that I think is sort of related to this topic of what we've been going over. You guys are really multidisciplinary journalists. With the rise of social media, you have to pivot a bit for new mediums, and now sometimes are on camera. How has the shift in opportunities impacted your approach to reporting, if at all? So maybe Jessie and Jennifer can speak to just kind of how much it's changed from when you came in first working on beats and what it looks like now versus when you started. So maybe start with you, Jessie.
Okay. When I started in the newspaper business, basically you get by being a specialist. You can do one thing at a time, and that's not the case anymore. For a person my age who's middle of the career, I still say middle of the career, 25 years in, but so we're trying to learn and kind of catch up a little bit. We're trying to, whether it's social media, whether it's video, whether it's television, you understand that our toolbox has to be really diversified now. There has to be a lot more versatility in what beat writers and what reporters have to do now. And I think one advantage the early career folks and people coming out of college is they're learning this now. And I encourage them to stick with that and understand that versatility is really going to help you as you go forward in your career. Again, for someone at my stage, we're playing the catch up a little bit. I mean, it's not difficult to do, but you're making a concerted effort, because like I said, in the beginning, we could be a specialist. I can be this anonymous person writing in a newspaper with a byline. and the only people that really knew you were your parents, right? Now it's there's a whole lot going on, and that's a good thing, and that makes you an appealing candidate. That, I mean, if you can get your hand in a lot of different things, in addition to being bilingual, in addition to doing TV, social media, I mean, understanding all the mediums, and then also understanding that it's going to continue to evolve as we go forward, and keep an open mind as we move forward. That's going to help folks on this call, and it's going to help people who are looking for jobs. So it hasn't been a difficult transition, but it has been a realization that media continues to evolve, and we have to evolve with it if we want to stay relevant and current.
Good. Same kind of topic for you, Jennifer, of how it's changed and how it's impacted how you do your work.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed immensely. Like Jessie said, when I first came in, I was just a writer. Kind of blogs were the new thing. So then it was like, you know, I dipped my hand in that, and then social media came. And I remember the first time I got a phone call to go on the radio, and I was terrified. I was like, I've never done a radio interview. You know, I'm a writer. My advice to everybody on here is to say yes to every one of those opportunities. The same thing when I was asked to start doing on-camera work. I never wanted to get into TV. I don't even think I'm good on TV, but I said yes to it. I learned. And I think for those of you, especially who want to be in the reporting world, it really helps your profile. You know, the more outlets you can get yourself a part of, the more fans you're going to reach. I can't tell you how many times I walked around Busch Stadium and people would come up to me and say, "You're Jen Langosh, right? I listened to you on the radio." And I would be like, "And hopefully you read me on MLB.com. And, you know, maybe that's not how they found me, but because they heard me, then they went and then they read me. And so say yes to every opportunity. It's okay if you're terrified. Ask for feedback when you do dabble in other mediums, because people can give it to you and you can improve and get better in those skills that maybe you didn't study or do a lot of when you were young. But certainly for anybody on here who is young, who maybe still is in college, any chance that you get to dabble in as many mediums as possible, do it. It'll pay off. It'll make you an attractive candidate, and it'll get you ready for everything you're going to be asked to do when you get into a job.
Sounds great. I agree. I was not anticipating being on camera at all, and that definitely changed. I had to get comfortable. Saying yes and kind of faking it till you make it on camera is critical. Another question from the room, one that I've heard a ton from reporters, and was curious because you all very much are in the same space, very competitive. How has reporting and information gathering changed since the pandemic began with limited to no locker room access, clubhouse access in this case? What different avenues have you used to get tips, build relationships over the past 18 months? And what guidance have you given to your young writers who are trying to do the same thing of find their footing? We are starting to see some things loosen up. Obviously, there's some pregame access when there's batting practice that has started to come back, but it definitely was a difficult stretch. So I guess maybe we can start with Jim and kind of go around to a couple of different people about like kind of what feedback and guidance you were giving to reporters who were working through this.
Yeah, it definitely has been more challenging for young reporters. There's no question about that. You know, most of my veteran folks have contacts in those organizations and have, it's not difficult for them to reach out to front office members and players too, you know, after games. There are some who are really plugged in with their team and can get a call back or a text back from a player or front office person on an issue or a game event that they're writing about. And they have used those avenues whenever they have needed to. It is more difficult for young people. It is really, really important to try to develop those relationships as much as you can. For the younger folks, I feel like doing that with front office members over the last probably 12 months has been easier than players because the players are kind of shielded behind a wall and it's really difficult to get them. So you just have to take every opportunity you have to do that. It's getting a little better now with kind of distanced outside on-field access with players. So hopefully they're getting more there, but that's going to be a process. And it's just going to be more difficult for young reporters than it is for veterans that already have a handful of contacts.
Matt, any thoughts on that one too? Just advice or guidance you've given to any young people?
I think it's really, you know, forced our folks to get creative. You know, as Jim said, it definitely the active players are tougher no matter what, and that's a challenge. But like especially last year when there was no baseball, when everything was shut down, we did some of like the best sort of historical evergreen content we've ever done, because there's a lot of, former players or former GMs who are kind of out there. And if you're resourceful and you're willing to call maybe their alma mater or call their former agent or call their former teammate, you might be able to get them. And so I think that there was an opportunity for those folks who are really willing to kind of take a little different tactic and try and mix things up a little bit, to not only try something new and meet some new people, but that's like kind of broadens your Rolodex for down the road, because some of these people will end up being good, maybe not sources, but good people for when you want to comment on any variety of topics, just building out your Rolodex so I think for young reporters in that case, it was kind of an opportunity to really try and figure out new ways to expand your base of contacts.
That's great. Jennifer, same question. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing that I've, encouraged, especially my young reporters to do, is to be really intentional to find reasons to need to talk to people. And I say that because, when the clubhouse is open and everybody's there, it's very easy to just walk up to somebody or get in casual conversations and you build relationships. You really have to work at it now. So, if you haven't gotten to know the farm director, okay, let's come up with 3 story ideas that are going to force you to call the farm director and have a reason to talk to him so he knows who you are and you build those relationships. But it takes a little bit more intent, I think, right now, because you're having to, as Matt said, be a little bit more resourceful and find reasons to go to people, as opposed to necessarily them coming to you like they did in the past.
Or to you, Jesse?
I had a conversation with Jim recently, and we were talking about how there's different ways to be a beat writer. There's different approaches people have, and there's different strengths people have. In my case, I have experience, so I have relationships. I can have the ability to make phone calls. Zoom isn't as productive for me. But one thing I've had to adjust, and I think, again, I'd love to hear Jim's thoughts on this, but I've had to, add more statistical analysis, add different approaches that weren't necessarily my strengths, and they were someone else's strengths. So I try to improve on that. So when we get back to normal times and we can get in clubhouses and all that stuff, I'll be able to rely on the experience, the relationships, the track record and the writing, but in addition, the new skills that I had to develop during this pandemic, or that I had to refine during this pandemic, where I didn't necessarily have to rely on them as much. But when you're on Zoom all the time, you have to be resourceful. So I'd love to hear Jim's thoughts on the different types of beat writers. And
yeah, I'll follow up on that real quick. We got to move through a bunch of questions. But it is definitely something that every beat reporter needs to bring their own skill set to the table. And when you don't have access to players, you have to think of other more creative ways to get at good content, engaging content. And the rise of explainer journalism over the last probably year or so has been a really great model for us, where you can kind of raise and answer questions with yourself, and you can do a 3 things that are going wrong with this team, or try to figure out what is going on with somebody at the plate. Has their approach changed? Or try to take a deep dive into why a pitcher is more effective. Are they changing their pitch mix? Are they throwing more curveballs or sliders? Like, there is so much information and data out there that if you have intellectual curiosity, you can tackle all of these issues. You don't necessarily need to talk to anyone. Would your story be better if you got an opportunity to? Almost always the answer is yes. But it doesn't mean you can't generate good content without it. I do feel sometimes like the worst content, this is going to sound worse than it sounds, some of the worst content covering baseball is just you telling me what happened and then what somebody had to say about what happened, because we're so far past that now. Everybody knows what happened in the game. There are times when big events happen or controversial moments happen where it's really critical to hear from the people involved in it, but that's not every day. There are many other days when you're better off finding a better angle to explore and exploring that with information and data than you are just putting a quote in the story because you can.
Yeah, all of that. Everybody who's watching the replay, like, rewind that and listen to that again, please, because it's really, really valuable information and tremendous guidance. 100% agree about explainers being a huge growth opportunity. And also for young people, I've been seeing a lot of questions like this. Like, you have to understand There are some things about that that's a superpower for you. Jessie alluded to your social dexterity and your digital skills. I also think you ask questions in a different way without preconceived notions of what you know. And that is hugely helpful because you get broader, better answers sometimes. Some people get slightly offended by people who ask leading questions that sort of imply they already know things. Not all of you have that. So take advantage of those things. All right, so now we have, again, I talked about job seeking. And so I wanted to go around the group and ask each of you what trait or two stands out for you in a candidate that makes you want to hire them. What trait or two have you noticed stands out in your best hires that you look back at? So just looking for just kind of a sense of what our group should know is what really stands out and what they should be striving for. So go back to the top, go back to you, Greg, a trait or two that are most valuable or important to you as you're looking to hire.
Sure. Number one for me is passion. Again, we work in a, luckily for us, we work in an area that a lot of people want to work in sports, right? It's people love sports, people love baseball. You know, we should be able to find really passionate people for these jobs. I want someone who is going to love their job, again, almost every day. Not every day will be perfect, but passion combined with, you know, work ethic and putting all your heart into something is really what I care about the most. I mean, there's other stuff I'm sure the other folks will say and writing ability and all this and things, but like someone who really cares about what they're doing and puts their heart into it, I'd rather have that person almost with no experience over someone that had 20 years of experience, but just didn't have that passion or that fire or work ethic anymore. That's really most important to me.
Sounds great. Matt, over to you. Same question. Best trait.
Resourcefulness, people who can kind of find solutions. I think, you know, as Greg talked about, we're really looking for people who are versatile, and we ask a lot of our folks now, you know, as we said, not just even, you know, we talked about specialists in terms of, you know, beat reporting, but now it even goes beyond that. You talked about, you know, reporter producers, basically all of our folks, maybe not all, but a large portion, especially compared to 5 years ago, are contributing in a variety of ways. They're working in our CMS, they're editing stories, they're producing stories, they're looking stuff up on Baseball Reference. So there's a wide variety of skills that we look for with people. And we want people who can answer the bell for any number of these things for a variety of reasons, because we want good content. And, you know, if I'm being candid, also managers want people who make their lives easier. So I can say like, hey, I'm assigning you this and I know you're going to do it and you're going to do it well and you're going to do it the way I want it done. And so people who can sort of help in an organization and know how to like identify the way things need to be done and why they're being asked to be done a certain way and can do it that way.
That's great. David, any thoughts on key traits you're looking for?
Yeah, there's just a couple of things I'll add to all of that is number one, just someone who's really hungry and not just producing when they're asked to produce, but has a real curiosity and wanting to do, you know, really having that hunger to produce more. And number two, somebody who's really open to feedback because the learning curve is always going to be very steep coming into these things. And a person's ability to, number one, be willing to hear the feedback, and number two, be willing to apply it. That's absolutely crucial. In my little corner of the world, that's crucial. So those are the two things I would point out.
Sounds good. Jennifer?
Yeah, I'll add, you know, somebody who's curious and innovative and forward thinking. I think, you know, we're always trying to stretch ourselves to think about different ways to get content to baseball fans. And so if you come in and have new ideas on how to do that, you are going to automatically make our group better. I'll say too, on that front, when it comes to interviewing, I always really appreciate people who have taken some time to become familiar with MLB.com and what we do ahead of time, because I like to ask them, what can we do better? And if you can come in with some ideas about what we can do better, maybe what we do well, but what we can do better, to me, that helps you stand out right away, because it shows me that you are invested in our product already and you've started to think critically about it and you're curious. You're showing kind of a curious nature that can help us. So I'll add that, you know, to what we already said about diversity of skill set. I think that's huge. And then lastly, you have to love the craft as much as you love baseball. I say that from a beat writer's perspective, who, you know, covered 100 30 plus games a year. The baseball is great and I loved going to the ballpark, but I had to love and have a passion for the reporting and writing as much of that, or else it would have been just as good to go buy a ticket to the game. So make sure you actually love the craft as much as you love the sport.
Jim, I know we've covered a lot of ground, but any other thoughts?
Yeah, I actually do have a little bit of a different take. I've spent an unbelievable amount of time thinking about this. You know, the thing I look for first, and Jen hit on this, is intellectual curiosity. You have to, that's where story ideas come from, right? When we talked about explainer journalism, if you're not curious, you will not have good story ideas. Without good story ideas, you don't have good stories. Number two is clarity of thought. You have to be able to take all of that information and organize it in your brain. If you can do that, you can write. That is more of a trigger to be a good writer than anything else, because if you don't have clarity of thought, you'll never get anything through to anyone. And then the last thing I'll say is empathy. If you're not interested in other people, you're not interested in telling their story, you'll never tell their story.
Phenomenal. Okay. Kara Wertzis has just joined us. We're thrilled to actually have her on the group as well. Mlb.com manager of ops. Welcome, Kara. I don't want to just throw you into the fire, but our current question is, we're talking about job candidates. We have a lot of students who are looking for internships, people who are recent grads who are looking for full-time jobs, and then people who are mid-career who are looking up. So we have this huge range, but bottom line, people who eventually will be applying for jobs no matter where they're coming from or how things go. And just curious about what traits you look for in people you end up choose to help hire. What stands out for you? What distinguishes people, and what you've seen from great candidates who are like, that's what they had. So I don't know if there's anything you feel like you can contribute to the conversation there, or just say hello to the group.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. As for your question, traits, I think this can honestly change from candidate to candidate, but I do think it's important that we find and hire folks from all different kinds of backgrounds, for no other reason that when you have diverse voices, the content will be better. So, we really do try to cast a wide net and try to find different kinds of people. But once I do have an opportunity to speak to somebody who would like to work here, either on the phone or in other times in person, something that I look for is a well-prepared answer to questions. I'm not necessarily looking for the right answer. If I ask about experience using a content management system and they don't have much or any experience, that can be okay as long as they've anticipated that based on a job posting and can explain why they might have a skill that would make it easy to pick it up. I'm also really encouraged when people have good questions about a role, and it shows that they're curious and serious about what they are interviewing for. At the end of a call, if I ask, do you have any questions? And somebody's like, nope, I think you covered everything. I always think to myself, there is absolutely no way that I covered everything. So I really like to hear if there's more, if there's a little bit more there. So I hope that, adds a little different kind of perspective from what I just heard.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. It's a huge help. Jessie, you're bad in cleanup. Good luck. What else?
All right, I'll just kind of keep it short. I think everybody's really touched on all the things, passion, curiosity. But one thing I kind of pay attention to is how are they going to fit into the team? What kind of puzzle, where are they going to fit into the larger puzzle? Is it going to be someone who's easy to work with, can be a good team player? I mean, ultimately, we're all on the same team and we're all working together toward the same goal. And I think the ability or the desire to be part of something like that means something to me. Again, I'm not sure if it's at the very top of the list, but we talked about passion, we talked about curiosity, asking good questions, all that. But for me, I think about being a team player, and working together and being a component of something larger than you. And, that means something to me. And I listen and I hear that when it comes out of people's mouths when they talk that way. It strikes me. And so it's just, again, it's just on the list. I'm not sure it's number one, but it's sometimes what I think about.
Yeah, team fit is definitely important. Okay, so we've talked about the traits. that are required. Now, how do the candidates convey those traits? How do they show you what they can bring? I was going to start with Jim, David, Karen, Matt on this, and we can have anybody else jump in or jump out on it. But cover letters, first interview conversations can be tough, no matter how long someone's been in the industry. So I get this question a ton from candidates. What is it that connects with you? How do they not screw this up, essentially, and show themselves to be someone who could be a highly productive, successful part of your team? So we'll start with Jim. Any advice for people who are going through that process? What do you look for out of whether it's cover letters or correspondence? And then in particular, the first interview, what do they need to be doing?
Yeah, I think, right out of the gate, just be yourself. I mean, that's like, for me, always people who are comfortable in their own skin when they're interviewing and not letting the pressure turn them into somebody else, because I do know it's a pressure-packed environment, are always the most appealing candidates. It just leads to better engagement. And I would also approach job interviews. I mean, I know, everybody wants, to find that position, but make sure it's the right one. I feel like one of the undervalued aspects of job hunting from both sides is just trying to find the right fit and making sure that it works for both parties, rather than just trying to, quote unquote, get the job, or from our side of things, fill the slot, right? So to me, that's best done through honest dialogue and being forthright, as Kara touched on, about things that you've done or maybe not done, and having an answer to the things you haven't done, and being able to put your foot forward on the things that you have.
Sounds great. Over to you, Kara, if you have any thoughts on guidance for people who are a little nervous about this process.
To me, you wouldn't believe how many people don't add a cover letter. I think a clean, well-written cover letters with your resume that show clearly, why are you interested in this job? Sometimes I get cover letters where it's very clearly the same one that they sent out to a bunch of different jobs. So personalizing it is really important. And also this, in that cover letter, saying what skills you have that would make you a strong candidate. That's always a good start. And then another piece of advice that I would give is just when people take a lot of pride in their work and their strengths and can give those examples of how that would translate into what we're seeking for a particular role, that's really good in early conversations. That shows that you are really going for it. So yeah.
Perfect. Sounds great. David, any thoughts on this particular one? People who are nervous about interviewing with you.
Yeah, I mean, I always, for me, I always give kind of a pass with that if that does happen, because obviously we know that that's not an easy situation for anybody. But just, I think that one of the keys is, I think Jessie said it, why is this a good fit for you? I think that's really a key thing. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago in my little corner of the world, why would lasmayores.com be a good fit for you? And what skill sets do you have that you think would make you a good fit for this? And I think if you can convey that in the best way possible, that's really what I'm always looking for. So that's really the main thing that I would say. Why is this a good fit for you, and why would you be a good fit for us, and why would we be a good fit for you? And that's what I'm looking for.
Sounds good. I'm going to go to Matt and then Jennifer to close this one out. So Matt, any thoughts on this one? Guidance, advice?
I'll piggyback a little bit on what Kara said, and not just in terms of catering your cover letter, but also catering your resume. I encourage people to have different resumes depending on the job that they're applying for. And, as Kara said, read the job description and see like, okay, what are they looking for? What are my experiences that would like really be a fit there? And I'm going to cater my resume to really sort of like highlight those things. Like I know what it was like being a job seeker, and it can get kind of tedious, but I think it definitely makes I think a difference. I know one example I'll give that I think is probably relevant to this group especially is that like a lot of times people won't even put on their resume that they're bilingual, and that's important in almost at this point, that's probably a plus in any field. In baseball right now, it's extremely important. And so I'm always kind of surprised. It'll come up in conversation, they'll mention it, and I'll say, like, you didn't mention it on your resume. You know, like, for example, if you're applying for a job as a baseball reporter, that should be very obvious on your resume. And maybe you have another job you're applying for where it's not as obvious, but so maybe it's not as important. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. From the interview standpoint, I think being able to tell me about your successes, and, you know, maybe sharing a story of a piece of content that you did and why it was great, or a project you worked on and why it was great, and why you think it reflects your abilities, is always something that stands out to me.
Great. Jennifer, any thoughts?
Yeah, you've had a lot of good advice here, so I'll be quick. I'll just emphasize what I said before, which is, you know, I always like to know that people have spent some time on our product and have thought about what they see on MLB.com, and again, what we can do to be better. So that shows that you are invested in us, and that we're not just like on your checklist of jobs you're applying for this week. And then Jim and Kara hit on this a little bit, but also be aware and honest with what you don't know and what your weaknesses are. You know, it can be a little bit of a turnoff if you're going through an interview with somebody and they try to present themselves as the best at everything, you know, you're talking about. It's okay if you're not really good at something yet, or if you need to develop a skill, be honest about that. Talk about how you think you can get there and how you can use this organization to better yourself. But don't try to pass yourself off as, you know, being an A+ necessarily in every facet of the job.
Absolutely. I will say preparation helps an awful lot with those nerves. So everything that Jennifer just said about getting ready and getting to know the outlet definitely is a help. So we have a question that came in that I think I'm going to ask everyone, every single person, because I think it's one that I hear a lot. And I think it's something that hopefully each of you will have your own perspectives about. It came from somebody who I think is really enthusiastic and passionate about journalism. So it's an interesting one in particular to me. How do you avoid burnout? Keep that passion going throughout your career. Some of you have been with MLB.com and are speaking really passionately about it after more than 2 decades of experience there. So just curious about how you sustain yourself, especially as we talk about the diverse skill sets that are required and the changing demands and everything else that's going on. So let's start at the top with Greg, how you avoid burnout and how you maintain that passion throughout your career.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's two things. Number one is always evolving, whether that's taking on new stuff, whether that's just really focusing at becoming a better, better at something that you do every day. It's really important to constantly grow in a job. For me, I think my dad or someone told me years ago, I'll give him credit, it may not have been him. It's always important to keep learning in a job, right? No matter how long you've been there, no matter how old you are. And the moment you feel like that you're no longer learning is probably a good time to look for another job, or speak to your boss or speak to someone and say, hey, is there something more, I can be doing? For me in my career, there have been many times, I'm sure I was close to burning out like a lot of us. We've worked, many hours, even though we love our jobs, can be exhausting. Again, I've been lucky that I've been able to do lots and lots of different things throughout my time here. My job has constantly evolved and constantly changed in directions that I never would have imagined when I started. So that's been really key. The other thing, honestly, is make sure you take all your vacation and time off. We really encourage that with our team. Number one for all of us is taking care of our staff, right? It is looking out for everybody. It is creating a family atmosphere. It is making sure that our employees are taking care of their physical health, their mental health, taking that time off. And, for someone like a beat reporter who's on the road a lot over the course of, 6, 7, 8 months, depending on what team they're covering, it can be an exhausting job. So it's really important that folks take time for themselves away from work, just to sort of mentally get away from all that. And I think that really helps. And I think every boss and organization, out there really needs to encourage that as much as possible, because sometimes you have employees that are afraid to take time off or think they're going to look bad for it or whatever. But to us, it's just super imperative.
Same question, Matt.
I think, for me, to the extent that it's possible, I try and find different projects to sort of dig into from year to year. A big one for this year, for example, is we're trying to do more and more newsletters to cater to different teams and their fan bases. So it's been a nice new project for me to sort of be able to jump and get involved with and work with our beat reporters to try and figure out how that's going to work and how we're going to make it happen. So to the extent that you can try and find different avenues to, get involved. I think that it can be tricky depending on the nature of your job, because, if you're a beat reporter, for example, you're still, you still have to cover the team every day. So maybe it's trying to find different ways to cover the team. Maybe it's like, hey, I want to do more deep statistical dives this year. Maybe we want to try and do a couple of long form feature takeout stories next year. So I think it's thinking about the different ways you can approach the job to try and keep it as fresh as you can.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I'll put my beat reporter hat on for a minute and speak to kind of the grind of the baseball season and having covered it for 13 years. Have interests outside of your job. Find things that you like to do that have nothing to do with, in my case, baseball or baseball journalism. Find friends who don't like baseball and will talk to you about other things, because sometimes you just want to be off the clock and not talk about your job, or have your friends ask you about the players you're talking to every day. To Greg's point, take your time off. And when you're off, actually be off, and for me, that meant like resisting the urge to go turn on the Cardinals game on my night off to sit there for 3 hours and watch it. That's not a night off. A night off should be going out to dinner with my family, playing tennis, whatever it might be for you. I think also really, really important, especially for those who are on the road and the daily grind of a beat job, take care of your physical health and take care of your mental health, because both of those can really be tested, especially being away from home. You can feel very isolated. The long hours can really get to you. So make sure that those are a priority. And if you feel either of them slipping, tell somebody and fix it, because you see a lot of people in this business who get stuck in a very bad place because they haven't taken care of themselves for many, many years. And then I think from, at least for me, from like a mental standpoint, I always approach my job every day as, hey, I'm going to get to go to the ballpark and I might get to see something today that I've never seen before. And that kept the job fresh. I think if I had approached it as, here I get to go to see game number 116 and, the Pirates season, as they've lost, 80 games already, it would really drag on you. So looking at it as, hey, I don't know what I'm going to get to cover. That's exciting to me. And I get to craft a new story about it, was like a little bit of a mental exercise that, made sure it stayed enjoyable and I didn't feel that burnout.
That's great. Kara?
I would say when you're feeling good, say yes to when somebody asks you to help out on a different project than what you're used to working on, because it can open doors to different things that you can do. Know what your strengths are. So if somebody asks you to help on something and you just know deep down that it is not for you, be okay with saying no, because you don't want to just be all over the place. And then also, yes, take your vacation time, take your personal time, and have fun with it. Because at the end of the day, we are watching baseball games, so that it should be fun. It should be really fun.
Jim?
Yeah, I'll echo what Jen said a little bit. When I started in journalism, I was not in sports. I started on news side. So when I was in newspaper for my first couple of years, it was all just news. When I was interviewing to move from news to sports, the managing editor asked me what my interests were outside of sports. And so I told him some of the stuff I was into, and he said, don't ever let those go. Because if you're going to cover sports for a living, you're going to need an outlet. Otherwise, you will start hating sports. And so I thought that was really great life advice. And so for me personally, I have always leaned on those other interests when I'm not working. So in my own family, my son grew up, he's a swimmer. He doesn't care about baseball. And for me, that's been awesome. I've been able to throw myself into that and watch him swim and not be thinking about baseball at all. When we're sitting around the dinner table at night, we're not talking about baseball. Most of the time, not talking about sports. We talk about, society at large and history and politics and all this other stuff. And I just mean, you can't let that stuff go. I don't really read baseball books. A lot of times that comes up, in our industry when we're talking as managers, like, hey, did you read this book and that on? And I just don't. I read other stuff. I read history. I read fiction. I read all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of use that to to unplug every night, and I read every night before I go to bed, and it's never about sports.
Thank you. David, same question.
Yeah, for me, it's something that struck me, what someone said was about diversifying what you're doing and the skill set. For me, over the years, I've had a couple different things. I mean, there's the grind of managing the homepage and the team pages of lasmayores.com, but there's also the reporter aspect of what I've done. And those things, I've never felt too much burnout with those because I've had that balance. But this year, I also had the opportunity to branch out into leading a Twitter Spaces, setting the agenda and leading a Twitter Spaces weekly space, which has been important, and then doing some stuff on camera. So all of those things, they definitely help when you diversify your tasks and you do those things. But in a general sense, I mean, I have to say that for me, I mean, yes, I have had moments, and I'm sure everybody here has had those moments where you're starting to hit a wall a little bit, but I take a deep breath and I say, you know, hey, life is a grind. And if life is a grind and it's going to be about baseball, there's a lot worse things that I could be hitting a wall with. And so I take that deep breath, and that really re-energizes me, and there's no burnout for me.
Sounds great. Jessie, same question.
If I could say, I think that's really important what David just said.
Sure.
Be okay with failing at that. It is going to happen. There's no way around it. And there are certain times, and we're about to enter one here in October with playoff baseball, that you're going to fail at this sometimes, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Great thought. Jessie?
Oh, first, I'm really glad we're having a discussion of the great question about burnout, because ultimately we're really talking about mental health and physical health. That's what this discussion is about. And I'm glad we're at a place where we can have these kind of conversations and we can talk about these things. Sometimes in some work cultures, not necessarily in our business, but maybe in baseball culture, sometimes it was frowned upon to take days off. If you missed a day of a couple games, your fellow beat writers or whoever is like, oh, look who decided to come to work today. That's not really healthy. I'm glad we're getting away from that. Our company has always been great about that, but I'm saying in general, the other reporters. So you'll get pressure from other reporters to not take days off. And I encourage you to take your days off and try to maintain some kind of work-life balance. It's easier said than done, but there has to be interest off the field or outside of sports that'll keep you going. I love that Jennifer said, hang out with friends that don't like baseball. It's so funny, but it's true. I mean, my next conversation with my wife about baseball will be our first conversation with my wife about baseball, except, outside of my kids' youth baseball. But like I said, I'm just really happy we're talking about it. I'm not sure there's just one solution to burnout, but I think just recognizing that it can happen and just, taking your individual precautions against it, because it will happen. I mean, on a personal level, I was early on in my career covering the Rangers, still trying to manage that, coming off of covering high schools. I had to go to the hospital because of stress. I was in spring training and I drove myself to the hospital because I couldn't handle it, and part of that was me not being able to express that and not understanding that I had a support group around me who would have listened to me. So one thing I will encourage you to do when you have these thoughts or feelings, speak to your managers, speak to your colleagues. There's support for you. And I think for me, I felt alone, and it's easy to feel alone. It's easy to feel burnout. It's easy to feel stress, but there's people around you who will help and people around you who care. So kind of keep that in mind, that we've all gone through these tough stretches, but we come out of them. And I don't know, I'm just really happy we're talking about this, because it's a serious subject. Burnout's a serious thing.
Thank you, Jessie. Yeah, no, I'm thrilled the question came in and that we get that opportunity to share that. There are a lot more sessions and sort of workshop opportunities from NAHJ and some of our partner organizations for people who want to do a deeper dive on that space and want to help understand it. So don't hesitate to message me after the session if this is something you'd like to hear more about. But I think this was a good, really excellent wide range of answers from people from a variety of different backgrounds here from Mlb.com. So I'm glad we were able to get into it. We are past an hour mark. I have two quick questions from the audience that I wanted to squeeze in and then give you all an opportunity for some final thoughts and kind of call to action from you all, whatever you all want to share or impart with us and impart with the people who will be watching the recording as well. So to hop to that, the first one is actually specifically for David. What advice or message would you have for someone who's just starting to cover MLB for the first time in Spanish? So just looking for any thoughts or guidance for somebody who's just getting in, any tips you have for the rookies?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I would say, and not to be self-promoting here, but read us. Read, and I'll do a little competition to espndeportes.com. Read especially newspapers in Latin American countries, baseball-heavy countries, Dominican newspapers, Venezuelan newspapers, Puerto Rico, Mexico, at least in the cities that are more baseball-heavy. I would say familiarize yourself with baseball terms. That's absolutely crucial. Get yourself well-versed in baseball terminology in Spanish, which is a whole language unto itself, and that's key. And then the other thing I would say is that, yes, we cover everything, but certainly be thinking in terms of what's going to be interest to the Spanish-speaking audience. You know, when you talk about player features, when you talk about stats and the leaderboards and who's doing what. Is Miguel Cabrera, is he close to 3,000 hits? How's Vlad doing as his quest, not only for the Triple Crown, but right now, batting champion? And not only that, how are the rest of the Latin American guys on the Blue Jays helping him, protecting him in that lineup? That kind of thing. So it's a two-pronged thing off the top of my head. Number one, familiarize yourself with the language of baseball in Spanish. And number two, always be thinking in terms of what's more interesting for the Spanish-speaking audience.
Excellent. And then this next one, I think I would probably just toss to maybe Jim and possibly Matt. Anyone else can chime in if you have thoughts, but how does one break into a sports career when you're coming from a different line of work, but it is your passion? What advice do you have for someone like that, especially someone who's considering doing this later in life? So Jim, over to you. Any thoughts about people who are making those career switches? What does it take to break in, especially if you've decided this is what you're passionate about, this is what you love?
Yeah, we do run into that from time to time. Obviously, you know, when you're in an industry like sports or baseball, could be any sport. If you have a passion for it, it's something that draws people to it. If they find that they're in another walk of life and that this would be a more engaging career path for them. It is not easy to do, obviously, but I would say try to find things that you did in that business that would apply to what we would need you to do to be a valuable employee with us, but also kind of know what it is you don't know about it, and don't just kind of assume that because you know sports, you can do this job well. Those are two different things. The skill sets you need to do this job well, those skill sets transcend just an interest in sports. So that is the part you would need to focus on. What skills do you have that would convince us that you could do well in our arena beyond just a passion for sports?
Sounds good. Same question for you, Matt. Any thoughts?
I think to the extent that you can also, and I recognize that everyone has a bandwidth, but if you're sort of thinking of changing careers, you want to get into sports media or baseball specifically, there are opportunities out there to try and kind of like craft a niche for yourself and maybe get involved with, you know, either whether it's just on your social accounts or writing for various like blogs or other outlets, there's chances to get your foot in the door and make a name for yourself. I'll give a perfect example. Mike Petriello, who's now one of our, he's like our lead stats analyst, and you'll see him on MLB Network. He does the ESPN quote unquote StatCast broadcast a few times a year. He was a web developer who ran a Dodgers blog for many years, and he was writing all the time. And then he started writing for Fangraphs. And this was back when I was at ESPN. And I'm just like, this guy's really good. And we started using him as a freelancer, and he basically just like, he still kept his day job until he was kind of like finding ways to kind of chip away. And eventually at MLB, when we implemented StatCast, I went up to him and I was like, hey, we need someone to kind of be our voice of StatCast. This was in 2016. I think, you know, you'd be the perfect person for this. And that was like when he finally made the career switch. That was when he finally, you know, quit his quote unquote day job. And he was, you know, I don't know how old he was, but he was definitely mid-career at the time when he made that switch. So I would say think of other ways to sort of try and maybe make your mark in the baseball content industry.
Sounds great. Thank you for the insight. All right, Greg, I am going to throw this last one to you and then also give you the opportunity to have any final thoughts on the tail end of it. So the first part of it is, you know, we have a lot of members who have gotten in, they've gotten in the door, they've had the entry level opportunities, they've gone maybe 3-5 years, and then they feel a little stuck because that next level of advancement is a little bit challenging from time to time. And then certainly those who want to go into leadership roles also, you know, for whatever reason, it hasn't always been the easiest. So any advice or thoughts on what it takes from your seat for people to sort of distinguish themselves and move up the ranks within your organization?
And for me, it's always figuring out ways to go above and beyond. And that's obviously going to vary by your boss and your organization. Different places will have different opportunities, but to me, it's those that come to me with, you know, again, can express their desire to do more, to move up, but also to work on sort of a game plan together with that person, right? What does that mean? How are they going to get there? If there's not an obvious path today, how do you work with that employee to get there? So being able to have that discussion with your boss, whoever that might be, you know, and coming prepared with ideas, things you're passionate about, things you might be interested in, you know, or sort of laying out for your boss, you know, sort of, here's how I can do more, here's how I can improve, here's how I can add more to the organization in the coming years. You know, being prepared with that as opposed to just coming and saying, hey, you know, I want a promotion, I want more. You know, sometimes that might work, but it's always good to have those other tools in your arsenal. And it makes you look like you are not just concerned about yourself, but that you're also concerned about making the company better at the same time by adding more.
Sounds great. And then I'm going to go through each of you rapid fire. Any final thoughts? Again, you're talking to a mix of students, entry-level journalists, mid-career professionals, people who are interested in learning more about what MLB.com has to offer.
Just reiterating, pour your heart into what you do. You know, be likable. You know, whoever you work with, make sure people around you enjoy working with you. That goes a really, really long way.
Sounds great. Matt, any final thoughts for our group?
If you are out there looking for a first gig, a new gig, I know sometimes networking can get tiresome, but you never know which connection is going to lead to something. So I'd say keep at it, keep trying to not just meet people, but meet people who can help you meet others and help you get your foot in the door.
Sounds great. Kara, any thoughts?
One of the things I feel like that I've learned a lot from is listening more than talking. I think no matter what situation you're in, if you really listen to what people are telling you, whether it's somebody who is above you or somebody who works for you, you can learn a lot from them, and then you can kind of respond accordingly.
That's great. Jennifer?
Yeah, you asked Greg at the beginning, like why it was important to be here. And I think for me, the importance is to let everyone here know that there is a place for you in our sport. And I say this speaking as a woman who covers baseball and was often in environments where there was nobody that looked like me. I mean, I would be surrounded by 25 men who played the game and 15 men who covered it. And we need people who have a diversity of background, a diversity of perspective. And so even if you don't see somebody that looks like you doing what you want to do, you can still do it. And so don't let that discourage you.
Excellent advice. Thank you. David?
The one thing I'll say, and everything that everyone has said has been great, especially Jennifer just now, but the one thing I'll say is make sure you're improving. Be better than you were a year ago. Much better than you were 2 years ago, and on, because improving and evolving is the best way to make yourself a fluid presence in any organization or in your career.
Jim?
Yeah, I think my advice is probably a little more geared towards people who, are early career journalists, maybe foot in the door already and starting, and that is just to embrace change. As somebody who has managed a group of reporters for 20 years, I can tell you that how we covered a baseball in 2001 and 2005 and 2010 and 15 and where we are today has done nothing but change every single year. If you are resistant to change, that is a good way to get left behind very, very rapidly. I will say, if you are someone who has been in the business for a while and wants to get into management or managing other people, the single most important skill you need to do that job well is to be able to tell people things that they don't want to hear. And you have to do it in a constructive way that makes them better coming out the other side. You don't need to be and shouldn't be mean or disparaging about it, but there are times when people need to hear things they don't want to hear if they want to get where they want to go. And it's your job as a manager to do that and facilitate that and put them in the position to have a chance, and then it's on them.
All right, thank you. Jessie?
Okay, my final thoughts for the folks who are on here. And as we mentioned before, versatility of skill set just really important as we go forward. Be willing to evolve as a medium evolves. One thing that's helped me along the years and even to this day is as mentors, people who can help you, guide you, or you can get advice from and have real conversations with. I know that's helped a lot of folks in this industry, and that's one thing I do encourage people to try to find a mentor. And one of the things that's helped me in general and in life and in business is the teamwork element. I mean, I think you work together and you all rise together. You elevate each other. And that's an approach that has worked for me in business and in life. And I think that's some advice I encourage others, because as reporters, we can kind of fall into our own traps. We can become self-indulgent. We can believe our hype. But the reality is we need allies and we need to be part of a team. And it's important to remember we're part of the puzzle. So I just encourage folks to just kind of keep that in mind, or keep that in the back of your mind as you go forward. As important as we think we are sometimes as reporters, we're a piece of a team, and that matters. And let's just try not to forget that.
Thank you all so much for your time. I personally have learned a ton from this session. It has been a joy to hear from all of you and to have this opportunity to engage. We will have this recording up for our members within a day. I believe we'll be able to process it and turn it around. It'll be on our YouTube channel, and we'll share it through all of our social networks. These people came and gave their time because they care. So my last bit of advice to anybody who is remotely interested in anything they heard is find them. They are easy to find online. I will help you find them if you decide to ask me, but find them, because they obviously have a lot to give and a lot of potential opportunities moving forward in the future. Next NAHJ Sports Task Force event will be announced soon. I am Iliana Limón Romero. I am our Sports Task Force co-chair. I will be sharing a lot more information about committees and other things that we're working to start up to continue to build out our group. We're very excited about that. And Joe Rodriguez, my co-chair, will be back for our next session. He is fortuitously out of the country on vacation, which I'm very happy about. And just to go to show, we all believe work-life balance, that's important. So thank you again for your time, everyone. Deeply appreciate it.